Hi everyone, I've just seen a film that is one of the best films I've seen in weeks. I've watched a few silly films recently. This is not silly, this is an incredibly serious, artful film about a difficult subject. It's called Julie Keeps Quiet. That is something like Julie Zwijgt in Dutch. Forgive my pronunciation. I'm going to talk a bit more about that word actually in a second, but before I get into it, I'm going to talk about two things. One is the question of language and silence in relation to abuse, which is the subject of this film. And the other is how the film addresses that through the way it's made. It's a film directed by Leonardo van Deel, but who's a Belgian director, and the film is set in Belgium, but it's executive produced by Naomi Osaka, who is, of course, a famous tennis player, among other things. So that makes it very interesting because it is set in a tennis context, a girl who's at school and training to be a tennis player who is hoping to go to an elite academy. And that's essential to her story arc, is that she wants to progress and become a major figure in tennis. And her coach is accused of sexual abuse of the students. The question in the film is, which is eventually to some degree answered, is what does she know, and what is the meaning of her silence in relation to what she knows, and really what is going to happen. Is she going to say what she knows? Is she going to hold on to what she knows? And behind all that, the more conventional narrative question of, is she going to make it into this tennis academy? All these things are going on at once. They are incredibly skillfully handled by the young actress Tessa van den Broek, who plays the lead role, and by Van Deel as the director. I looked up, when it came up on screen, Julie Keeps Quiet, I remember thinking, that's a good title when I saw that was the title. And then it came up on screen, Julie Zwijgt. It's a very Dutch word, if you'll forgive me saying so, because it seems to be trying in its own competition, how many consonants can we include in one word? And it is winning that competition, I can assure you. But this word interested me because I thought, we would say Julie Keeps Quiet. And there's one word for this. I want to know what that one word means. And I've just got home from the cinema and Googled it. One of the first things that comes up is a Reddit thread from reddit.com/learndutch. And this person, Milo the Cuttlefish, thank you Milo, has said, is this rude to say? I was learning this on Duolingo, the word zwijg. And my Dutch partner was absolutely shocked and told me to never say it because it's really rude and people will get offended. Definitely don't want to offend anyone. Okay. This film is less sure about whether it wants to offend anyone. I think it's quite happy to test us. And someone has replied, who's clearly a Dutch speaker, and said, Zwijg is very condescending. It is a very direct and short order. We'd call it kortaf. You would only really use it when you're too angry at someone to curse, really. It isn't necessarily rude, but just very condescending. Someone has quoted something, Zwijg horriger, silence you surf, SERF. You can get away with that in a bar with friends, but not in the office. I think Zwijg can only be used really in an ironical way. Okay, so there's something we're really missing when we translate it as Julie Keeps Quiet, because we're missing the idea that someone is basically saying, Julie clams the hell up, Julie shuts up, might actually be a better translation of this phrase. In other words, something about Julie's silence is about power, coercion, and status, and language. Now, there's something I really noticed as this film went on. I'll just give you a little précis of most of the story without the spoilers. I won't tell you exactly what happens because there is an element of mystery that I wouldn't want to dispel. But as we get into the story, there is a grievance or disciplinary procedure going against Julie's coach. Julie herself is a very sweet, perhaps, but very quiet, very internalized central character who's trying to get through school, whose grades are suffering a bit and who's really focused on this tennis academy that she keeps going to at the weekends and gets training in. And we see a lot of that. And it's announced one day at this academy that her coach, whom she's personally very close to, whose name I've just abruptly forgotten. I think it's something like John. I'll call him John. It's not that, but it starts with J. Has been accused of something, but it's not said exactly what. In other words, already we have this question of what is it? What is the word for it? Why are we not being told the word? As I watched her going through her days, I noticed that Julie spoke in a number of different languages. I mean, in Belgium, you have the setup where some of the population are from a Flemish background and they speak Flemish or Dutch. I think it's mainly Flemish, but a Belgian will have to correct me. And some people speak French. And from what I know, I used to have friends who lived in Brussels. From what I know, that is a crucial, central, sort of political, cultural, linguistic, economic fault line in the country. All countries have these kinds of power relations expressed through accent, language, geography, economy, and from what I remember of my Belgian friends, the French-speaking contingent in Belgium have historically been more privileged, or at least there's more cultural cachet in that contingent than there is in the Flemish-speaking, which tends to be more there's been more condescension, to use that word. Now, again, a Belgian can step in and tell me that's terribly simplistic and insulting, and I'm sorry if so, but that was what I was told at the time when I was visiting. And I really noticed as I watched this film unfold that Julie is a Flemish speaker, but when she's in the tennis school, some people are speaking in Flemish when they're on their own, but the official language of everything is French. Everyone's talking to each other in French when they're all gathered together, whether they're French speakers at home or not. There's a great bit where her coach is coaching her, a new coach, and there's a bit where he says, do you want to be top level or not? And he's speaking to her in Flemish, but the words top level, he says top niveau, so he goes into French at that moment. In other settings, she's suddenly learning German. There's a whole storyline about her and her friends putting on a show in German. In other words, this is a film about who speaks which language, who gets to speak, and what the meaning of words actually are. And as we watch this process unfold, we realize that it's a film about the core of language, which is not spoken, the core of silence, if you like, at the heart of language, the way in which someone can be talking and not really speaking, not really telling you anything. The way language can express things it doesn't directly say about who has the right to speak and who has status, but hold back information as well at the moment of speaking. There's a wonderful scene where, and I won't tell you who it is speaking to whom, because it gives away too much, but there's a scene where someone rings someone up to apologize, and there's so much, it's not who you might be thinking, by the way, and there's so much that apology expresses that is not said, that may not be sayable for that character. So what is the connection between speaking and silence? What is the connection between expressing yourself and shutting up? And who gets to decide? That is obviously a sort of crucial ethical question in the film, because what it's also about is a character Julie, who does have some kind of relevant knowledge, right, as to what this coach is really like. And she won't reveal it. And she won't reveal it because she is still enmeshed with this coach. And as we watch that relationship evolve, a lot of it is done through silent speech, text messages. One of the main ways in which people speak to each other in this film is that buzz of the phone that tells you you've received a message. In other words, it's speech that's wordless in that sense. It's a communication we hear, but we can't see. There's quite a lot of buzzing that we never see what the message is, but we know that she's been contacted by him, and this is this ongoing chronic issue in her life. And what the film does with that is it shows how much the burden of this experience isolates her And it does that through use of the camera. And for the first 20 minutes, it really drove me mad, which is that only Julie is in focus and most of the rest of the scene is blurry. She's foregrounded and everything else is kind of blurred out. There's a thankless role for a character called Joris, who is a chemistry teacher who I don't think ever fully unblurs in the course of the whole story. But while that did get on my nerves to start with, actually as it went on, it became a brilliant visual shorthand for Julie's claustrophobic isolation and the terrible contaminating feelings of guilt and complicity that she's living with. I've actually never seen a film that rendered the experience of vulnerability to abuse so potently. It was at times unbearable how this experience gets in between you and yourself, gets in between you and your life, and alienates you from others and from yourself through someone else's cruelty, it's someone else's pathology, and one of the cruelest things about it is they make it your problem. You have to somehow process it. And this incredible injustice is rendered just in that relentless use of the camera. It's brilliantly done, it's visceral, but it also, as time goes on, changes. And there is an arc for Julie. There is a change, there is something that happens. She does grow in the course of this film, despite the terrible burdens that she has to carry. And some of those scenes where she's playing tennis are among the most eloquent. I loved the way it used tennis as a visual language, so that we watch the ball coming back at her without seeing who's on the other side of the court. The very first scene is her practicing without a ball. So we see the movements without the object, which is very close to its treatment of language and communication. It's an incredibly clever film. It's a rigorous film in the way it's made. It's brave because of its rigor, because I'm sure there are commercial pressures to make a slightly more amenable, hospitable film even about this subject. But it refuses to do that. So I commend them all. Well done for making this film. Naomi Osaka, the director Leonardo Van Dil, and the lead actress as well. I think it's a stunning performance, and I really hope we see more from all of them. So I wish them all the best and congratulations. If you want to see this film, see it, but know this: it's not for everyone. This is a difficult, painful film, but it's a very important one, and I'm very glad I went. Thanks very much.